Huh? Oh, yeah, I can, can't I? If I remember how. Bluetooth on. Mm. Hmm.
No, it's not mute. Unless I want pictures and I don't want mute.
Let me turn this pasta water up a bit.
It was boiling. That's why I put the lid on it.
Okay. Turning it up if it wasn't running after the pasta.
I know the name. Oh, they were saying it wrong.
Oh.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Was at the bottom next to I'm Dave Rubin, RBDA chair. We have our vice chair, Eric Ornis, vice chair, meeting organizer, Kathy Bayer, our new treasurer, and Ted Benhari, emeritus board member, and head of the nominating committee, who'll be running the election tonight. We have three scheduled items on the agenda. First is the annual election of the RBDA board. Then second, Justin Cummings, our county supervisor, will give his regular update on what's going on in the county and what he's been doing for us, and talk about a tax initiative that's been proposed. And the main event is a presentation from Lisa Carrier, who's a council.
Hey, Ruben.
Council person from the Amah Mutsun tribe. She'll be talking about the tribal history and plans for what they're doing on their property.
Okay, let me put it on his nose. Up his nose. How?
Yeah, if somebody, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. We have a fourth item that we're going to squeeze in between following Justin and before Lisa. Buell asked if he could make a presentation about mountain biking. So we'll squeeze him in as a pop-up. And now I'll turn it over to Ted for the board elections.
Well, welcome to the 67th annual RBDA meeting. Almost as old as I am. So we've got 3 people who are running for re-election. And then it's Garrett Hammock, who joined the board last year. He's really doing a great job, and we appreciate his stepping up. He's running for a 2-year term, as is our chair, Dave Rubin, and Eric Ornis, and they have just been fantastic leading the board, and we're really grateful for all the time and effort that they put into the issues that they've been following. And then we've got Kathy Bear, who just stepped up recently and was appointed to the board. And Kathy will be running for a 1-year unfilled term until the next annual meeting in 2025. And hopefully she'll be a 2-year term after that. So that's the nominees. Any members, paid up members of the World Bonnie-Doon Association who can only vote in this meeting because all the nominations were closed at the November meeting. So they're all running unopposed. So I'd like to see a show of hands to elect those 4 people to their board seats. Only members can vote, you know, if you're a member. So raise your hand if you want to say aye to Garrett, who's I think online, and Eric, Dave, and Kathy. Okay, nays? All right, carried by 5 votes.
Okay, Justin, it's to you, and if you move over to this chair, that camera will track you.
All right, I'm actually gonna stand, so.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. So good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Cummings. I'm the district county supervisor, and Bonnie-Doon resides in the district that I serve. So just want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I have some updates on some of the goals for this year. I'm going to go through those a little briefly because I really want to focus on talking about an initiative that the county is launching around a sales tax increase, and really want to provide you all with information on that, and to be able to get some feedback from you all to make sure that everyone has a good understanding of what's going to be moving forward with that initiative, which is launched and will be on the ballot this March. So I just want to thank, well, first of all, Happy New Year. And I just want to thank those of you who were able to weigh in on the North Coast Facilities Master Plan. That really outlines a lot of the projects that we're going to be seeing implemented along the North Coast in the coming years. But that final report is going to be coming to the board either at the end of this month or early February. And it's going to really prioritize what are some of the projects that we want to see moving forward. Some of those that have gotten a lot of community support. The rail trail, I believe it's segment 5, that's going to go out to bid within the next week or so. And the benefit of that is not only will it have a trail that goes from Wilder to Davenport, but they're going to redo the parking lots at Panther Beach and also at Davenport parking lot. And there will also be an installation of bathroom facilities there. So hopefully it will reduce, some of the bio waste that we see that happens out when people don't have access to bathrooms, but also will improve the parking lots so you're not driving across moving craters in order to get access to the beach. In addition to that, my office is continuing to work on improving emergency communications in Bonnie-Doon and the North Coast, and just general communications, because we know how challenging it is for folks to have communications up here, especially when the power goes out, and making sure that the 72-hour backup systems are in place. We spent a lot of time in communication with Comcast last year, and we want to continue to make sure that those communication or the backup systems are implemented and installed and are actually functioning so that when the power goes out for multiple days, people have access to communication. We're going to be moving forward with some projects at Shark Fin Beach and Cement Plant Road to try to improve the parking that's there, and also the walking and biking ability on Cement Plant Road, because we've heard for many years that you know, most people have to walk on the road itself, and having some kind of path that can get children and just pedestrians off the road would be a big improvement. I've recently been informed, and actually was informed earlier this year, about some issues around the mountain biking, which I know some people are here to talk about. And so I'm really interested in hearing what some of those issues are and how we can work with state parks and the community to see how we can address some of the concerns that are brought up by the community. And, you know, road maintenance continues to be a major issue that we want to focus on, along with fire reduction and vegetation management, fire prevention, so that we can make sure that if and when a fire occurs, that we can respond in a way that's going to benefit the community. And I will say that there, in the coming weeks, if not month, there will be a proposal around the 4-leaf contract to reduce the contract scope, because of the fact that the county's been paying a lot into 4-leaf, but we've been receiving fewer and fewer proposals around rebuilds. And so it'd be great to hear from you all around, you know, whether that makes sense to do from a rebuild perspective, or if we should keep the contract the way it is. And also just would be good to hear from folks about their experiences rebuilding, to understand what have been the challenges and how we can better help people rebuild from the CCD fires. And so I'll kind of leave it there, and I'm happy. I mean, I come up every couple months, and so happy to provide more updates as they come along, but really wanted to take some time to just fill you all in around the sales tax measure that's going to be coming forward on the ballot this March. So the county has proposed a half-cent sales tax measure, and it's going to be called Measure K, that's on the ballot, which we believe will provide a vital resource to addressing many of the community needs. We know that the county is facing issues around affordable housing, disaster response and disaster mitigation, road repairs, employee retention, increased needs for mental health services, and homeless response. And so the county has moved forward with putting this measure on the ballot. There will be a half-cent sales tax. So right now we're at 9%. That's what the sales tax is if you go to, you know, restaurants or places within the county. And this would increase it to 9.5%. So if you think about $100 purchase, if you were to, you know, buy a wetsuit that's $100, that would be 9.5%. That would be $9.50 that you would pay in tax on that. And so currently it's 9%. And just to compare that with some of the other jurisdictions, the county is at 9%, Capitola is at 9%. Santa Cruz City is at 9.25, but they're increasing theirs by a half cent as well. So theirs will be 9.75%. Watsonville is at 9.75%. And Scotts Valley is at 9.75%. There's not a whole lot of businesses here in Bonnie Doon or in the North Coast area. So for example, you know, if folks are going and for example, with tourists, and if you're going to other parts of the county, they'll be paying that increased sales tax, but this community will benefit from it greatly. And so the Measure K is estimated to raise about $10 million annually, and that will be every year unless the tax is ended by the voters. So in perpetuity, this tax would raise about $10 million for the county, and it would greatly benefit the folks who live in this area and other parts of the county. It wouldn't be levied in the cities, but if city residents are shopping in the county, they pay that tax, and it would benefit county unincorporated residents. And we believe that a large portion of this from the tourists that come to our community would also benefit us as well. And so some of the things that the county is thinking about in terms of what that revenue is needed for, providing wildfire, flood, and emergency response prevention programs and disaster recovery services, repairing streets and potholes, attracting and retaining frontline workers, including nurses and emergency responders, through affordable housing development and other resources, provide mental health services for children and vulnerable populations, and maintain and improve neighborhood parks. And so I'm happy to take any questions on that. I know it was kind of a little bit of a fire hose, but there is a lot of information that's going to be coming forward. There's a website that's available, and I'm going to be sending out resources to the RBDA, and there'll be a lot of other opportunities to gain access to the information so that you all are well informed when you're going to go to the ballots and vote on this measure. So I'm happy to take any questions. Sure.
All the current pieces of the sales tax forever or until rescinded, or are some of them, do some of them time out?
I think with the sales tax, they're in perpetuity until rescinded. There are other taxes like Measure D, not the one we just voted on, but a previous one on roads that will sunset. But this one would be until the voters repeal or rescind the tax, it would be in perpetuity.
We don't really have any county parks in Bonnie Doon. But there is money being raised all the time from home sales and from maybe property tax or the sales tax things. And I thought that it would be, since we don't have the parks, if the money could be moved towards our road maintenance and making our roads safer, and maybe having a little bit more shoulder to walk on and ride bikes on. Because in a lot of places, there's no shoulder to escape onto. And it really limits our community connectedness. If you're too afraid to walk like to state park, we have state parks, but we don't really have any county parks. It would just be nice to see that our money is used locally to make our community safer. You know, if we're not going to have county parks and things like that in our community, let's have safe roads that we can get around them.
I think that's a great idea, and I'm happy to communicate that back to the committee as well. Any other thoughts or comments? Okay, well, just want to thank you all again for having me, and I really hope we can count on your support for the sales tax. It's going to be really important for us to be able to help maintain our services and maintain our infrastructure here in the county. So just want to thank you all for your time. And if you have any questions.
Yeah, before you take off, I think the community could really get behind that measure if there was a clear connection to the fire prevention activities that would come about from that.
Okay.
I think if we're doing things to spend money around, I think another one that the community really appreciate would be what we need to do to get the PG&E's line up for burying power lines. Power outlets that we have
For PG&E?
by inbound power lines. That's another one we're talking about. Going places.
Got it. And I think that can be a thing we can work on with the state as well, but just a point well taken to make sure that can be something we're going to be really pushing.
Been in contact with your office, they've been really helpful. So
With whom?
with your office.
Oh,
they've
great.
been really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Any other suggestions for Justin? Well, thanks again for continuing to keep us updated.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Okay, now we'll move on. Buell, what do you have for us? A pop-up on mountain bikes.
Well,
If
there
you-
is.
If you come up and stand near this or sit on that chair, this thing will track you.
Okay. In our last Highlander, there was an article about illegal mountain bikers and outlaw mountain bikers using our community and our parks. And I just wanted to speak to that point. I've been thinking a lot about it for the last few weeks, and it bothers me that the Highlander is coming off is like, oh, all these people are really bad, and which I don't feel is the case. And but I do want to acknowledge some of the concerns of some of the people that do have problems with all the cyclists on the roads these days. And so, the main issues are road safety. And I think some of the ways to mitigate some of the problems might be some signage, warning people of entrances and exits, and maybe trying to educate the community about safe turnaround spots, because there's a lot of complaining going on in Smith's Grade about safety. So signage would be really helpful. And there has been a tremendous increase in cyclists in our community in just the last year or two alone. And this is also very similar to all of our parks being used a lot more. The pandemic, and then the social media that has kind of blown up usage of the parks, but people are really wanting to use parks. You see it in Fall Creek and down at the bottom of Felton Empire. There's cars spilling out onto the roadways, just wanting to use facilities. And the Highway 1, that tremendous amount of traffic now that we see, and that's just happened over the last few years as well. A lot of it due to social media, I think. Like, oh, here's a great place to be, and everybody flocks there. But our Highway 1 is really a hazard, and so the blow up of usage, the amount of usage is really increased in all sectors, whether it's for hiking or biking. It's all gotten a lot more usage, and that is just seems to be very common. So some of the complaining about people on Smith's Grade, all the bikers on Smith's Grade, is part of this huge increase of use, and people want to be outside and use our outdoors. And so, labeling mountain bikers outlaws because of illegal trail use is definitely, well, it's rightly so, I guess, because pretty much all mountain bikers are outlaws, because majority of the trails that people ride are all illegally built trails. And it's kind of a big problem in some areas, because some of the trails are really poorly built. And it's also causing conflicts and safety issues on the road. So part of the history of the problem is that the state parks, they're really underfunded, and they're really not able to keep up with the demand and building new trails and accommodating all the wave of bicyclers that are wanting to use the trails. And there's just not enough work been done to promote the sport. And it's really been maybe 20 or 30 years of like, hey, Park Service, we want more. And they've really had a policy of, let's just say no, because it'll be easier that way. We don't have the funding to build more or plan more. And that's really part of the biggest part of the problem, that, that they're just not able to keep up with demand. And there's a huge demand. The products from Santa Cruz, Fox Shocks, Santa Cruz Bikes, Specialized, there's a lot of industry, and it goes all around the world. And people come to Santa Cruz wanting to experience, what we've got here and the trails. It's a huge tourist industry, and most communities are going, yeah, bring it on, come to our towns, because people spend money with tourism, and it is a good thing, but not managed properly, it can be a safety hazard. and a problem on our roadways, and our roadways are sketchy. We've had a history of logging roads being built and forests being clear cut and forest fires. And now, the forests are coming back and they're doing well. And, now people want to experience the parks and the open space. And part of the open space, like from north of Smith Grade up to and back of Pine Ridge, has all been off limits for as long as it's been a park. Why do we have parks if we can't use it? And this is off limits for hikers as well as bikers and, horseback riders or everybody else. It's a problem to have off limit areas in state parks. Why have state parks if we can't use this space? And it is in our backyard. And a lot of them is all on logging roads, with connections. Trying to limit what people want to do is making environmental problems worse. Poorly built trails are exacerbated by this, let's just not have it. Lack of planning equals trail anarchy. And just saying no is not an effective plan. Concentrating usage in just Wilder Ranch is a problem because we need to spread the usage out and not concentrate it in one area, which has pretty much been done. There's no biking for the most part in Big Basin, no biking in Fall Creek, no biking, very little biking, only on dirt roads and nice scene marks, no real trail riding. So it's pretty much all of our state parks except for Wilder Ranch is off limits. So expanding the usage will help greatly, I think, in spreading out the bike usage. Let's see. Yes, and I'm just about done. Oops, I'm really close. So the reality here in Bonnie Doon is that safe cycling is really in a sad state of affair. And there's a lot of distracted drivers on their phone. There's people driving fast, rebuilding Bonnie Doon from the fires, and commuters having to hustle to get to work. And so our roads are narrow and have no shoulders to escape onto. And, it's a reality. Safety is a problem. And riding in the parks on the dirt is way safer than on county roads. And mountain bikers want to be a part of the solution and not the problem itself. So better planning is part of the solution to the issues at hand and not exclusion. So thank you very much. Any questions?
This would be a great topic to follow up, have a whole meeting on this. I don't know if you were here for Gray Hayes' presentation on wildlife and conflicts between recreation and wildlife, particularly pumas and bobcats. But it would be good to have a more extensive conversation about how do we optimize use without negatively impacting wildlife, and how to arrange more legal trails.
Yeah, and mitigation of the issues, right? It's really
I
important.
would just say a couple things. I wrote that article. I live on Smith Grade, and I've observed over the years, I was a mountain biker for many, many years, as you know. And I agree with everything you said, everything that you said, which is, I think, is what the article also said, the safety issues and proper trails and management and trying to get state parks to give us some money to actually do that. And I'm about to sit down with one of Justin's assistants to talk about trying to promote those efforts and get some of those things done in the next few days now. One thing that I would like to say is that the parks are not just for people to use. They're for the natural environment, for the animals and for the plants. And that's, we preserve it for them. Just because we have the land and it's open, doesn't mean that people can just go anywhere they want and do anything they want. A lot of the animals do not like to be around people. And we preserve some areas where mountain bikes are not allowed, even hiking is not allowed, just so the pumas and the bobcats and the foxes and all of those can live their lives and be preserved as a species. I know that we live in Bonnie Doon because we love the wildlife, we love the rawness of it, and people and animals can coexist, but not everywhere all the time. So I think dedicating some certain areas that are not for human use is really an important reason that we've worked so hard over the years to get these lands preserved.
I'll follow up, because I think this is a good topic for the public discussion.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
I just got a little riled up when I was reading the Highlander, so that was, I figured needed a little comment. But yeah.
Okay. We're gonna switch over a little bit. Lisa, are you online? Yes, Lisa Carrier. Hey, you're muted though.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, great. I'm gonna, we'll keep you on video. Oh, thanks, Justin. We'll keep you on video so everybody can see you for, if you want to give an introduction. And then when you want to start with the slides, let me know, and I'll project your slides here. And if you tell me when to advance, I'll move to the next one.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
We're good?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Well, Mishmin Truhis, which is a good day. Conrakat, Lisa Carrier. My name is Lisa Carrier. I'm sitting here in our tribal home in Bonnie Doon, and I'm with my cousin Stephen Pratt, who also was an AMLT, an Amah Mutsun land trust steward. So he's going to share a little bit about that experience. It's kind of ironic to follow this whole conversation, but yeah, here we are. Land is really important to us too. So that was kind of a good following. So if we want to, Dave, just go right into the first slide. I'll just kind of talk a little bit over it. I think there was a profile done in Highlander, so I won't spend too much time because we did have quite a bit of slides. Just to let you know, I'm not a council member now. I was a council member for over 20 years. I served even while I had a career move and had to move to Atlanta, but I still served on my council while I was in Georgia. So it was over 20 years of service. I was co-founder of our Mutson language foundation to bring back and revitalize our language. And I'm currently the director of operations for the land trust. And I live here on the property in Bonnie Doon on Sunlit Lane. It's my job to manage the home and the progress and the different things, activities that we do here. Stephen, my cousin here, he also works on the property as a part-time because he's a student. And so I thought tonight we would focus a little bit, we're gonna have to focus a little bit on our history. And I thought it would be of interest for you guys is, how we got to Bonnie Doon and what we're doing here on the property and how that may impact or could possibly impact the neighborhood in teaching our traditional ways and managing the landscape. And one of the things the gentleman before me talked about was, wildlife and wildlife corridors that are so important to us. So I could feel for all of that. But the main purpose, Stephen, do you want to do an introduction real quick?
Sure.
Yeah, let me just.
As Lisa said, my name is Stephen Pratt. I worked with the Amah Mutsun Land Trust for about 5.5 years or so, off and on. And so I've been here working at this house for over a year now. And as Lisa said, we'll get into the history and talk about how we got here and what we're doing here. And so we're happy to share our work. And thank you.
So for those who don't know, the official name of our tribe is really long. We're the Amah Mutsun tribal band of Oholone Coastanoan Indians, historically known as the San Juan Band and the San Juan Bautista Band, Indians of California. You can go ahead, Dave. I thought it would be interesting for you to understand, we are very, I don't think people realize how vast our territory is. And then when we speak to, we're talking more in modern day terms. But our tribal territory covers San Juan Bautista, Gilroy, Hollister, Watsonville, Morgan Hill, Salinas, Alcorn Slough, the Pajaro River, Uristock, several sacred sites in the area. That makes up like the major cities to give people an understanding of kind of like the vastness of our territory. We currently have what we would consider 700 BIA documented Native people in our tribe. There's, we have a long history. We consider there's four distinct decades of what we would consider very traumatic times for our people, devastating times for our people. And I have a lot of stats around that, but due to time, I'm going to kind of go fast through those because I'll be honest, it sucks a lot of energy away from us to continue to have these conversations over and over again. So I try not to dwell here and really try to focus on the future and all of our efforts and the things that we're doing in the community with our tribe. But we'll go ahead and kind of, give you the basis of why we are in the state that we currently are. Our tribe was never technically terminated by an act of Congress. However, we remain a landless tribe since our federal acknowledgement status had begun in 1906. But there was a Jurisdiction Act in 1928, and both, living members and direct ancestor of ours were enrolled with the BIA in 1930 and 1932, and then again in a period of 1948 and 1955. And like myself, I was enrolled in 1968 and 70 wave. But what this means is that we were never federally recognized as a tribe. We were recognized as individual California Indians. So I am registered, I have a so-called BIA number as an individual California Indian, but my tribe is not federally recognized. And this was pretty devastating to us. Can you go ahead and go do another slide? So we still continue to operate under a petition called number 120, which means we are in line for federal recognition, but our chances of that are very, that's probably something that would not be in my lifetime if we were very realistic about having that acknowledgement. And so the path to us having the land trust is about us trying to figure out, okay, if we don't have that route available to us to sustain ourselves and to have land, how do we be self-sufficient? And so that's what we want to kind of focus on explaining to you is, the steps that we have taken to support our tribe and our culture and our history. So one of the first periods that was probably the most devastating was the mission, going through the mission systems. And so our tribe, the vast population of our people were either in Mission Santa Cruz or in Mission San Juan Bautista. And that honestly is our greatest tie to this area, is that our people were taken to the Mission Santa Cruz. We know that through history, that through marriages and relations, that, we have ties to this area, but we right now do not know of any current descendants of the Awaswas people within our tribe. It's a very complicated understanding of having proper documents and paperwork, and some of it not being available to us. And because of the devastation of how we were moved around, we've lost a lot of oral history. So some of the important things about this period was that there were over 1,900 and, excuse me, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. There were over 19,400 Indians that died at Mission San Juan Bautista. And overall, 150 Indians died in California in this time period, reducing California's population of Indian people from 350,000 to about 200,000. And you're going to see as we go through the decades that this number continues to shrink. In San Juan Bautista Mission, the priests, they were, one of the fortunate things in this whole situation was they were meticulous record keepers. So there's a lot of information that was available to us around our language that was, in the long run, able to help us begin to bring our language back. And we were able to use the documents that one particular father kept, and his name was Felipe de la Cuesta. The mission attempted to civilize us, I guess would be the best term to say. And so they removed us from practicing any of what we consider our tribal activities. So once we moved into the mission system, we were not allowed to speak our language. We were not allowed to conduct our ceremonies or use our Indian names. Those things were all stripped of us. And of course, I think that most people who know about the mission system know that there was so much disease that devastated us that came with the Spaniards when they came over into the mission system and began to develop here. And that, that was devastating to us. So smallpox, measles, and unfortunately venereal diseases they ran rampant through our tribal people. And from that point, we then had to move and endure the Mexican period, which was from about 1834 to 1848. And it was really in this time period that we entered what we would consider like slave-like conditions. And the work that was asked upon us was brutal. And so again, measles, pneumonia, diphtheria, venereal disease, all of these things once again reduce the population in the California Indian community by about 100,000 individuals. So we again shrunk from 200,000 to about 100,000 in this very short time period. That's how brutal this period was. You can go ahead, Dave. So before we talk about the arrival of the Americans, when you think about 1848 and who we are today, what I like to have people understand is when you're down to 100,000 people, it's a miracle that we sit here today and that we sit here in Bonnie Doon and that we were able to survive that on so little people being left of us. Because the brutality didn't end at that point, it continued with the arrival of the Americans. There was some kind of devastating laws and jurisdictions and rulings that were put upon us that stopped our ability, to move forward in who we were as people. So there was the governor at the time of California was Peter Burnett. He signed an executive order to exterminate all Indians, and the state of California paid 25 cents to $5 bounty for every Indian killed. And during his campaign, the state paid out $1.2 million. And I think, Stephen, we talked about this. That was a 2-year period.
Yeah.
So it was really even more money than that to wipe us out at that time period. The hostility towards Indian continued with numerous legal restrictions of our civil rights, our voting rights, just basic judicial provisions and protections. So this pervasive persecution is, just literally what leveled us as a community, as families, and as a tribe. And we were at that point, there was no government left of us in any way. And so we had reached the point that it was hide or be killed. So I can tell you, like, for Stephen and myself, the surnames in our family are Higuera, Moreno, Moniz, Cervantes, Bravo. So you can see there's just, a lot of Hispanic and Latin surnames. And so what our people did is, Indian was the lowest of the different social structure in the state of California. And so whenever there was any censuses done, any record keeping done, and interviewing done by the government, when people come around to gather information, the last thing we would do is say that we were Native. It was always that we were Mexican or we were Spanish. It was whatever was going to keep our people alive. And so there's a lot of lost documentation because we couldn't represent ourselves as who we truly were for survival, purely survival purposes. So in this time period in 1891, there was an act for relief of Mission Indians. And in 1891, the President of the United States signed that act, and it provided what they would call a just and satisfactory settlement of the Mission Indians, residing in the state at the time. And what actually happened with all of that is that the Amah Mutsun believed that this act would give us federal recognition. We feel that it did give us recognition, but that our tribe was illegally denied what we know today in present terms is a reservation in the San Bautista or Santa Cruz area. You can go ahead, Dave. So the Amah Mutsuns endured, many periods of colonization, and then we moved into what we call the era, of Asuncion. And this was that through the 1900 census, the federal government took a renewed look at us and had a more positive interest in California Indians and just Indians overall in the United States. And during this time, our tribe kind of reemerged because of the work that Asuncion did. She's one of our most famous and most prominent elders. And so just for kind of like family lineage facts, Stephen and Mara are, you guys are third? It'd be like your third. Yeah, it's their third great grandmother. And Asuncion and my great grandfather, who's in the second picture on the the left, the couple that are standing, he goes by our name for him was Tata Pancho Moreno. Asuncion and him were first cousins. They're the brothers were their Asuncion and Tata Pancho's parents. And so we come from that lineage and that long line of history, both Mara, Stephen, and myself. And Asuncion became a leader in our community, and she basically saved our culture. Her willingness to speak, her willingness to continue to practice and not be afraid to talk to those who came about us, about our history, about our language, our medicinal practices. She was willing to share all of that. And there are those who say that, through dreams, she knew that that was her responsibility to do. And, we couldn't be more indebted to her now. But along with her, there were several other elders. And through that picture, that is my great-great-grandma Asuncion, and her name was Josefa. They were considered doctoras. And so they were famous and known as the two homes that sat side by side, that you could go there and you would be treated. And so people from all types would come and camp out in the front yards in their homes in Gilroy and wait to be cured by them from natural plants and what we believe are our medicinal plants. And so they did this from the beginning of the century all the way to, I want to say they were active until at least like the 1930s, before, age took its toll on both of them. But what's interesting, I'll just give you a little side fact, is my grandmother is actually 100% Spaniard. My great grandparents are from Spain. And when they decided to move to the United States, to California, they put their roots in Hollister, and they took their children, which was my grandmother, to Asuncion and Josefa to be cured because they couldn't afford, a regular doctor. So my grandmother grew up being taken care of for her health through Asuncion and Josefa, and then eventually married Josefa's grandson. And so our ties to California and to California history, whether it be our native side or a Spanish side, is very strong, very deep, very deeply rooted, but in a positive way. The community in Hollister and Gilroy between these two groups was very strong, and they took care of each other. So it's just kind of an interesting, take on history at that time. But to get back on track, in terms of our reemergence, our people became unafraid to speak, because of kind of like these laws and these different attitudes being lifted. And so many people came to speak to us, and one of them was a man by the name of John Peabody Harrington. Most of us know him as J.P. Harrington. He did interviews with Asuncion and the San Juan, we call the San Juan Bautista community, all through the 1930s. And his body of work provides many linguistic and culturally rich sets of records. A lot of them, he traveled around and he recorded his findings and his notes on wax cylinders, and these cylinders made their way to the Smithsonian. And over the years, in the 90s, I was one of a small group of people. We began translating all of those notes to try to bring back and insert those notes into databases to help to bring our language back. So he was a mad genius when it came to linguistics, and I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time talking tonight. But he had a crazy phonetic system that he made up to capture our language in its purest form. And he did this with multiple other tribal communities in California. And so the lady that's J.P. Harrington's kneeling, and they have a little snowman in the front. The woman there, her name is Martha Herrera. Would have been one of our cousins. And Martha was a young woman in the 20s, and she was single, and she traveled with Harrington, and she wrote impeccable notes with amazing handwriting to document all of his finding. And it's through her notes that we've been able to go back and retrack a lot of our language. And I always feel like Asuncion was, a gift that was given to us, but I always feel a little bit that Martha's one of the true heroes in our history, because she took great risks to be able to travel with him as a young woman in that time period and do all this documentation. And it wasn't until years later that her daughters opened up a chest that she had and found a lot of these documents and different notes and different pictures. Because again, even though this era of time had opened up, people were still very, very guarded in what they shared. So it was just like, that was the reemergence of us in that time period. And Harrington and the Smithsonian, they employed Martha to do this work. And I always just feel like she definitely should get far more credit than she does. The rest of the pictures it's my great grandparents and my grandpa. And the last picture is my mom, who lives up here in Bonnie Doon on the tribal church with us, and my uncle. And I believe that was like about the beginning of the 1950s. You can go ahead, Dave. So with these many periods of colonization in the era of Asuncion, by 1928, many of our tribal members, as I told you, they were no longer afraid to speak and cooperate. And that began to open doors. In 1915, Lafayette Dorrington was assigned to come to California, and he was to interview the tribes in the area and deem whether they deserved land or not. And a report was filed, and what was written about our tribe is that Mission San Juan Bautista, we were well taken care of by the priests at that mission, and no land was deemed necessary for us. And we later discovered that he actually had never even been in the area when he made these determinations. So for us, our views on this is that we were never really actually terminated because of all of these false information that was reported back to the US government. And so what's interesting about it is that at the time, there was probably 230, 250 tribes approximately in the area, but only 45 tribes actually were given federal recognition and given land back at that time. So you can see that not only to us and what you would call the Ohlone or the California coastal Indians, but this was just devastating to California Indians as a whole. You can go ahead, Dave. I'm going to skip through some. So in the modern era, the 30s brought us, a death of a lot of our elders. The 40s saw the Mutsun begin to go to war for World War II. And some of our family history between our lineages that one of our major lineages, they actually went to the Central Valley and continued to work the land. And so a large portion of our tribe is now based in Madera, Fresno, Hanford area because of the migration down there for that type of work. Stephen and Mara's family, they went to the Monterey coast. They were butchers, fishermen that worked down in Monterey and Carmel. My family migrated up to the Bay Area to work in the shipyards. And so both Stephen and Mara and my family, our grandmas were Rosie the Riveters. They worked in the canneries. My grandma actually knew Dr. Ricketts and the John Steinbeck and that whole era of people because they would live in Gilroy Hollister area, but on the weekends they were able to go work in the canneries. And then when they moved, then they actually had to make the physical move up to the Bay Area to live in, Hayward, Oakland, Richmond, and that area so that they could work in the shipyards. And so that's how our tribe ended up being split up. And so for us, it's very challenging. And especially during this period when it took so much longer to get anywhere, it was very difficult for us to stay an active community because we were spread, geographically, we were spread all over from Central to Northern California. And that still exists to this day. We have a good portion of our tribe down in the area that I explained, and then we have quite a bit of our tribal members. I grew up in the Bay Area. So the 50s and 60s, we had begun to attend. There was a powwow, a 3-day powwow in San Juan, and people started coming back to those type of celebrations and gatherings. But I'm not sure that a lot of people really realize that the culture of California Indians is we do not powwow. That's a beautiful cultural and rich in dance tradition, but it's not something that we did because it never evolved and made its way into that area. So the songs and the dances and the way that we practice ceremony is still very sacred in a sense that it's still what was done pre-contact. The way that we build a roundhouse, the materials, the regalia, the things that we use are still from those times before contact. We were never able to evolve into the way that you traditionally see people with a regalia and that they wear for powwows. That's just not a part of us. In 1991, we actually reformed our government, our tribal council. So you can see there's just like this huge length of time that we were not technically a government. And it's just not been that, far back that we actually reinstated our tribal council. Today, we have an active community of about 700 members. Around 2010, we were having a series of meetings because that's when it had kind of, there was a lot of talk about casinos. There was a lot of talk about how to create relationship with investors so that we could begin the federal recognition, to have the federal recognition process in place. And so we had meetings with our elders and asked the question, how are we going? What should we do? And how do we stay a close-knit community? And how do we survive? And how do we bring back our traditions and our culture? And they told us, and the leaders at the time, that our obligation was first and foremost to Mother Earth and protecting it. And I can tell you as a little girl, even growing up in Hayward and suburbs of Hayward, that, you know, plants and gardening and food sovereignty and the relationship with the land was always with us. There was always an emphasis of important on that. It's what we did on the weekends, whether it was, you know, being in the water, whether it was hiking, gardening, that was always a part of who we were. So there was a lot of talk, and we formalized, and in 2014, we formed the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. You could go ahead, Dave. And make sure, I don't know where we are time. Okay.
You're good.
Okay, so I want to say it's now been probably 25 to 30 years. Personally, I moved back from Atlanta in 2020, and between about 1994 and 2020, we had this complete awakening as a tribal community, and really began to focus on bringing back our language, bringing back our dance and our songs. And along with that, as I said, began this talk with our elders about, okay, we want to do all of these things, but we have no financial means to make any of this happen. And the frustrating thing was that we had no land to go practice, to plant, bring back our medicinal plants as a community, to meet, to be able to have gatherings. We just had no ability to do that. And it was extremely frustrating to us. And so areas that were significant to us as families, like I'm sure people have heard about Chachoktok Park in Gilroy area with where the Uvis Dam is. Like there's pictures of my family in the 20s and 30s and 40s at those dams with big, huge gatherings of family members. But now we couldn't even, we had to ask permission to just go visit the park as a community. And so it was through that frustration and through what we feel is our obligation to the land and to earth that we decided to go on this endeavor of creating the nonprofit of the Land Trust. And so, as I said, you can see these are a lot of the beginnings. So the middle picture in the top is myself, and at the time my goddaughter, her name is Angelica, when we first learned how to make what we call a tiwi hat, which is a top knot hat that we wear during dance ceremony. Those are literally the first two that were made after probably 100 years. The picture of the lady in the Thule boat is my mom. She at the time was in the Carmel River with Linda Yamani. Some of you may recognize her name. She's a renowned basket weaver, and I consider her a mentor. And it's the first time that we began to make Thule boats and float them down the riverways. Extremely exciting time. The picture down at the left is our first language class. This is a very small group that started meeting every Saturday to begin to reintroduce our language. And then the picture on the very right-hand side is my cousin Carol, and that's the first basket in my family that had been weaved again in probably 150 years at that time, and that would have been the mid-90s. And the center picture is us working at, I think that's at the UC Santa Cruz at the ARB, when we began a relationship with the university and the Arboretum and had the Mutson relearning garden. So you can go, Dave. So I'm going to let Stephen talk a little bit about the Land Trust. I'm going to have him share his experience. I'll let you know that we created for these 4 principles that when we first started the Land Trust were part of our strategic plan, and that was to conserve and restore indigenous cultural and natural resources within our traditional territory. It was to steward our lands and waters, combining traditional resources, again, environmental management and contemporary approaches, ensuring the resilient future of all inhabitants and what we call the Popolochium area. That's like the territory of the vast part of the lands that we are from, and fulfill our obligation to a creator. And the last one is research, and that was to research and teach the ways of nature, returning to the path of traditional ecological knowledge that our ancestors followed for thousands of years. And through that, those principles, we created programs, and our stewardship would be responsible for bringing back cultural burns. So we started a fire program. We began to delve into ocean and coastal stewardship programs. We work with trying to save the inner tidal zone. And this is really more Stephen's territory, so I don't want to say the wrong thing, but he can explain that a little bit. We've brought back our native plant propagation program. Some of you probably are familiar with Pie Ranch and driving down Highway 1 where Cascade Ranch is, and we have a hoop house there where we are growing and propagating our native plants, and then doing work out in Coasque Valley to bring back the natural habitat before contact and not habitat, the landscape. We've been at that for now 10 plus years.
Definitely.
And I know in the time that I've been here, we've done like, I believe over 400 and something plots. Where we do is we create like a 10 by 10 square, and we put all the native landscape, the plants that make the landscape into that area, and then it spreads. And we're trying to bring the valley back to what the floor looked like before invasive plants took over. And then we have what we call our cultural resources program, which is more about protecting sacred sites. It's about doing surveys. It's about being involved in monitoring programs. Like when constructions company come in, we have to have monitors there to make sure that they're not disturbing human remains or different tools in that could be dug up, excavated. So these are kind of our main programs, but I was going to let Stephen talk about like the experience of what being a steward is for the land trust.
Oh, it's all good. So where I kind of want to start with just talking about it, and I'm not going to take long, it's just the idea of what even stewardship is.
Yeah.
And so historically, our tribal people and the majority of tribal people around the world and in this country have had some sort of relationship with the land in which they live on. And so that relationship includes kind of an easy one to go for is burning. Burning was a routine practice throughout our culture, and it allowed to where we wouldn't have as much of this crazy vegetation leading to these devastating wildfires we have now. Of course, that also comes in from logging, which happened in late 1800s, early 1900s. But due to us being removed from stewarding the lands, we've seen a lot of overgrowth and invasive species coming in, whether that's European species or even our own native species, without any control, then it kind of falls apart, and the whole environment will be essentially devastated from it. So our goal with the stewardship program is to essentially teach our tribe, and specifically it's catered towards the youth, but not exclusively, and to bring back these practices and allow us to maintain the work and also learn it. Because me being a young person, I never learned really much about our culture or any practices. All I knew is we were told we were native. That's all I knew. And going into this program helped open up the world for me to see the environment in which we live through a different lens, and also working alongside that. And so I've worked on many programs within the Land Trust, and my recent work has been specifically involved at the Spawny Dune House, because I feel that we must steward this land that we have, because it's the foundation for us regaining our relationship with lands.
Okay, Dave, you can go ahead. So what the Land Trust has done for us as a tribe is it's given us many gifts and opportunities, employment opportunities, We've been able to institute research to bring back our cultural practices and ability to gather and have ceremony, funding to hold our language classes, educational events for tribal members. It's allowed us to have a deeper community outreach. But when we say community, we don't just mean with our tribe, we mean with the areas that we live in, whether it be being able to teach, educational programs at schools, developing relationships with teachers so that they introduce the right curriculum and tell a more factual and truthful narrative to their students. We have relationships like with Amah, the Museum of Art and History in Santa Cruz, and bringing back a native area, a garden in the actual museum. And we are now doing all the plantings on the outside of the museum itself. So we have relationships with state parks, county parks, to help them change the landscape of the lands that they're responsible for. The monies that we fundraise for and that we receive allow us to support legal counsel and protection of our sacred sites, because it's millions and millions of dollars to be able to do that. So this allows us to do environmental studies and be able to write reports that prove where our sacred sites are, why they're important to the landscape, to keep them in a more natural state and not allow those areas to be overdeveloped, which a lot of times actually is helping whole communities. It's not just about our tribe, but for the people that live in those areas. We're also, like I said, we have many partnerships for restoration amongst many groups and different agencies. We're not like fully into it yet, but when you think about all the programs and the work that we do, they are all climate change based. But we are working on our second strategic plan, and we're beginning to look up our objectives and how we create a program around climate change, and how do we fit that in with the programs that we currently do, and develop plans and objectives that will help in that area, or do research. And a lot of that right now has been a lot of coastal work. It's been about our riverways. It's been about dam removals. And again, the area where Stephen is studying and does a lot of work is the ocean beds. It's about protecting all of the little fish so that we can make sure that we feed the big fish. It's about bringing the salmon back. So there's just like endless opportunities for us in those areas. And then it's just, what I think is probably super important to everybody in Bonnie Doon, in which, we've lived at the house now a year and a half. And we survived last winter, which was really interesting. And so, the fire, we weren't here. We actually, our stewards were working the lands through the through the big fire, but we did not have the Bonnie Doon property at the time. But our respect for the community and how tight knit it is, and how well that you all have taken care of each other, we have great admiration and respect for. And so we feel a sense of duty that the house and the property that we're on, that we're good stewards, and that we be an example for how to keep the yard and what type of plants to pick to use, so that they're fire safe. And so cultural burning and prescribed burning, we have a network that we work within. We have our own goal to have our own station and our own crew and our own fire engine at some point. Indigenous people are doing that up and down the coast of California. And I'm sure you've seen, different news specials in that about the governor and just the state itself starting to embrace the native concepts of how to control fire. And so we are a part of all of that. You can skip, Dave, go to the next one. I want to try to be conscious of time. So this is our house up here in Bonnie Doon. For those of you who don't know, I think a lot of people know, so there's no need to worry, but we live on Sunlit Lane, and I know there's some Sunlit residents out there. So thank you for supporting us today. But the reason that we came to Bonnie Doon and we acquired this property is our stewardship had reached a state of crisis. Our young people were literally camping Monday through Friday. They were driving from Fresno, Madera, Dinuba to the coast to work the lands Monday through Friday. And that was all camping. And after 10 years of this work, it was just really wearing our tribal people down to keep that pace and live under those conditions. And we had experimented with being a part of the Girl Scout camp at Batano and finding different homes to possibly rent, but you know, the cost of that is just insane, as we all know what it's like to, you know, with the cost of mortgages and renting in anywhere. I mean, we are completely priced out of our territory. There's not a single tribal member other than I can think of maybe 5 to 10 that even live in our territory anywhere in the Bay Area, but certainly not along the coast. And so we reached, you know, a desperate point of how do we continue to sustain this work and give our stewards a good life, because they're really only home on Saturdays because it takes them all night to drive back. And on Sunday, they got to do their chores, they got to pack up, and they got to get back on the road to be ready to go to work on Monday. And so we honestly, the executive director at the time and myself went out on Zillow and we're like, look, we got to find a home. We got to find like a 5-bedroom home, and we've got to be able to hold 10 stewards if that's even a possibility. And we came across this home that we found, and we didn't know that we could make it happen or not, but we put a call out to our funders and wrote a pretty impassioned letter of why it was important to have our stewards on the ground in this area doing the work that we do, and all the opportunities and benefits that it could provide us if we had a residence in the area. And we were able to raise the money, for which we're so grateful for, to purchase the home here on Sunlit Lane. And it is now turned into kind of our tribal events headquarters. This past summer, we hosted our first youth summer camp on our own land. And I think it's important to understand that as a tribe, we probably hadn't owned land for over 400 years. So this was a significant purchase for us to have this property. Since then, we have, I have a list of things that we've done here. We have created self-sufficiency around food and raised beds here. We are planting our native foods, our lettuces, potatoes, medicinal herbs. All of that is being produced at the house here in Bonnie Doon. And from that, you can go ahead, Dave, and drop down. From that, we have done things like we are beginning to create salves and scrubs and soaps and medicinal teas and things that we would like to begin to give out to the community, but also become a revenue generating source. But we are offering these things to our community. We are teaching them. We have workshops and classes here because the house is big enough to do those sort of things. So the house has become a primary residence for our stewards Monday through Friday, but on the weekends and one time a year, we hold our youth camp. And this past year, we had almost 100 participants here on the property. We had a tent village out in our backyard. And for the Sunlit residents that are maybe tuned in, we're just so grateful they embraced us and supported us having a youth summer camp. We had neighbors who volunteered their property for parking so that we wouldn't demolish the roads. And it's just been a great experience to be here. And everyone's been so supportive of us because we really are living out a dream that we didn't think was possible, to have this house and be able to do everything that we do here. And you can go ahead, Dave, and drop down one more. I want to just quickly show you. Well, this was our first winter solstice that we celebrated last year, and this year we opened it up to our neighbors on the Sunlit. And so we had community with us to celebrate solstice, a night of, just prayer and offering and honoring the change in season. There's pictures of our accounting team able to come up for a week and go through a workshop here at the house. So it allows us to gather. We've had staff members here all week, participating in our strategic plan. We make our regalia here. We hold workshops. You can see that we have medicinal plants drying in our garage. And so we've set up a whole area to provide materials for us to cook. Like at our solstice, our soups were made from our own herbs and vegetables and that. And then we do a lot of things to show appreciation and have dinners and events to thank our donors and to thank our funders for the work that they do. And the house has given us the opportunity to do all of that. So you can drop one again. This was the first summer camp. That's all the adults on a well-deserved boat that had no children on it, because by the time we got to Thursday, we were ready to be on the water by ourselves. But that's adult volunteers. We were out at Alcorn Slough and had taken the kids out to see the otters. And for some of the kids, that's the first time they'd ever been on a boat before. Here's some of the children. So all week long, as they went and they learned about the different programs, and develop their relationship with our plants, they would collect them, but that's a traditional thing that we do. And then we flower press them to create a plaque for them to take home so they could remember the week. Our kids broke off into teams, and what we did is we identified birds that are significant to us culturally on the coastal line that we actually see at sunlit. And so we had 9 teams and 9 different birds that represent in the year that we've been here. To see those birds here on the land. So we taught the kids about them. They made flags, and our flags went in our yard to break up into the team. And that's just kind of like our welcome. Go ahead, Dave. And then I wonder what we wanted to share with you here is when we purchased the property, it was beautiful, but it was chock full of invasive plants. And we wanted to completely reconstruct our front yard to represent a meadow of what this landscape would have looked like before development and before the intrusion of all the invasive plants. And so what we did is we literally gutted our front yard and created a map of how we wanted it to be. And I think we have 30, I think we're up to 30 native plants now that belong in this area, and also our plants that mesh with, with fire, like I guess the word to use is like they're fire retardant, in that they will come back after a fire. They will stop a fire line getting close to your house line. And so what we've tried to do is we've done a massive amount of clearing of this property and removing vegetation up close to our house, up close to our fence lines, creating paths around our property, but trying to show the community and our tribe that we can do this in a beautiful way that's not really that hard to do. And these plants are gorgeous. And so the idea is that no matter when our tribal members came up to the property, no matter what the season was, something would be in bloom. So it was a lot of research for us to figure out which native plants that we have that we could plant, that there would always be color in our yard. There would always be the scents of our plants for our people to be greeted by when they came to the yard. So this is just a few pictures of as the work was done. And then for those who may not know, but the community had become firewise in the time that we moved here. And we just feel very proud to be a part of the community that was able to do that. And this is, our contribution to that, and making sure that we're responsible with how we manage the land that we live on, and hope to be an example of that. So you can go ahead, Dave. So Trumsanaka means thank you in Mutsun, and I think we're at the end.
Yeah, do you want to show the list of plants, Lisa?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Dave, you can go down one thing because I wanted to make this available. Can you go one more, please? I'm sorry. But I do have a list that would be available. These are the plants that are actually reflective of our meadow. And if so, anybody is interested, I can provide that link. Maybe we can work this out with Eric that I can get this list to you. But I also have the link for you to be able to go out and research the plant, the growing season, how you tend to them, what type of, do you need sunlight, non-sunlight? I have all of this information. If anybody would like to have that and begin to think about how to bring this into your yard and plant these plants, I'd be happy to share that with you. So I wasn't sure time-wise if we were doing questions or.
No, that's great. I think we do have time for questions, but first I wanted to thank you. It's probably just an indication of my ignorance, but I think I learned more about the history of local Indian history in your presentation than I knew from my whole life before then. So that's fascinating. So thanks for sharing with us, and let's
Thank you.
let's open the questions up to the local audience and the online audience.
Yeah,
I can't,
sure.
it's dark here, so I can't see if anybody. Okay, now, any questions here?
Yeah, between here and.
If you come up over by this thing, it'll hear you and see you for the Zoom audience.
Between here and where I live in Bonnie Doon, there's a site that was excavated and studied that had lots and lots of mussels in the piles, where people gathered. And so I'm wondering if that was your specific tribe, or if that was your group, or is that another? I'm just trying to figure out if that was another group that was also in this area. I know that they were Oholone, but.
So Lisa, could you hear that question?
Yes. So that can be answered several ways. Number one is, this was probably what we would call the Awaswas speaking tribe that would have been, or a tribelet of that would have been in this area. But also due to trade and moving up and down the coastline, who knows of, Ohlone people, Miwok people, could have brought and shared the different clam shells and that into the area. Because there was so much.
I think it was a large volume. It was pretty clear that it was just mussels that they had gotten from the ocean, a couple miles, like 3 miles down the road, and that was diet.
Yeah.
So
Well, the thing also is they would have been used ceremonially and also as food. So they had so many different uses, so you could see why they began to stockpile at the sheer amount that they did.
Okay.
But to just answer the question is, if we want to be technical, it's likely not our tribe.
Right. I want to make that clear.
Because they're essentially the tribal people that were here in this area, like let's just say Santa Cruz County, there's no known living members of those people that we were aware of.
Right.
So our tribal territory, if you want to look at modern times, is kind of Watsonville South and inland.
Yes.
But due to relationships we've built with people in this community and also different organizations such as Semper Vira, Spanish State Parks, many others, we have entered into this area because this is where we've been welcomed and helped.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So when we say Awaswas, that has no relationship to our actual tribe, the Awaswas people.
Okay.
So Phyllis,
Relatives,
is
probably.
that location that you're the west side of Bonnie Doon Road, that's the archaeological site, I think.
Right.
Cabrillo College, I think, has
Did the
had
study.
excavations there. We've seen the classes there. I don't know if are you familiar with that archaeological site?
Yes, we're very much aware of that, and we are actually, I'm gonna let Stephen talk to it because this is a relationship that he's forged. But we know the professors and we have a great relationship with them, and we've actually are building a relationship to have input. Go ahead. I'm just gonna let
That's okay.
Stephen go.
I'm a student at Cabrillo College, and so one of my professors introduced us to the site, and so we've gone and visited, and we are developing a relationship with that site for our archaeological training, because we have a program within our land trust doing archaeological work. So that has been opened up to us as a site in order to train our tribal members in archaeology. For us at the moment, we have not done any research on that property, but we are in talks with Cabrillo about interacting with that area.
Yes.
Right, and the dig was actually, it was several years ago, if not a decade ago.
Yeah, there are published reports out there and public, reports about the dig and about the work that they did there. But we are definitely re-entering a relationship with them at that property, because it's extremely convenient for us to teach our tribal members. I mean, it's literally less than 10 minutes away from us. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question, is there anything we can do as neighbors in the Bonnie Doon community to support the work you do?
Kind of heard him.
Oh, it's red.
I'm sorry.
The very last one is the same question.
Yeah, well, I'm blind. What do you want me to do here? They're 30 years younger than me, so this is super easy for them. As neighbors, well, obviously supporting us, you can donate to the land trust. I have those links available. We also have volunteer program out at Cascade that they're actually taking applications right now to volunteer to work at Cascade Ranch in our plant propagation program. So there's ways to help us there. We are considering the Sunlit House because of the work that we're doing here, starting our own volunteer group. We're just not ready to launch that quite yet. But if we do that, we would get back in touch with the Bonnie Doon Association and announce that out to come help us do work here on the property around native plants. And like we've talked about some of the different things around learning about salves and scrubs and herbal medicines and things like that. There are some things we can teach and some things that we hold sacred. But we're willing to share whatever it is that we can. So we're kind of, we've been here a year, but we have had so much work to do here to clean up the property and get it to where we want it to be, which we are still working on. And we had our own flooding issues here on the property. And so we feel like we're just starting to come to the point that we can introduce things and involve the community here. I think one of the things was, obviously, it's like, please try to use the plant list and see just what little work you can do on your own property to protect yourselves in a beautiful way. Because you would be honoring, the people from thousands of years ago and the way that they lived and what that landscape looked like. And if you're ever in the area, the garden, the meadow in the summertime is stunning. And it takes very little work once you've planted the plants. Because the seeds scatter naturally. And so the upkeep is minimal. So that's one of the great things about building a landscape like this and having meadows in this way is little work, great results from it, and really beautiful.
Just to add, and to really echo what Lisa's saying is, we're just still like building up, and it's difficult to be able to guide anyone to what kind of help they can do, but to echo really utilizing the plant list and planting certain plants in your property. And I don't know, this is just my own thought of, if you do that and you want to tell us about it, that actually does help us.
Yes.
Because it shows that you're learning something from us and implementing it. And if you sent us a photo of let's say you do a small native garden or you're planting those, that helps us because that encourages us to do more and reach out to more community.
Yeah.
And then also, I see there's a question on there of do we do property consultations as far as plants?
Mhm.
We do not, and this list is what we have so far, and that could be a potential thing we have in the future, but we don't have that in the works right now.
Yeah,
But we appreciate anyone who does want to support, and also we have volunteer programs at one of our other sites, as
Mhm.
Lisa said. And we will be setting up a volunteer program here if anyone wants to volunteer, but that's just not ready yet.
I just want to make a comment about the next street down, Wildflowers Lane. All our neighbors at the front of the road have all found Indian artifacts, and I think it was a very active area basically on the flat part of Bonnie Doon, you know, just the next street down from you guys. So it's been very active in the past.
yes. Yeah, we've heard those stories. We're definitely aware of some of that. And quite frankly, there's more work than we have the capacity to reach out to and investigate all of these things. So we have to really concentrate on our sacred sites and those more important areas to us that have findings and cultural significance because it's just so vast.
Yeah, and to speak on that is, as our tribe and many other tribes, it's hard for us whenever artifacts are found on other
Mhm.
people's properties. Of course,
Yes.
there's no way we can mitigate that in any way.
Mhm.
But in kind of a positive light, it shows kind of how rich this area has been historically
Yeah.
due to such an abundance of artifacts from Native people in this area. And that's truly incredible. But yeah, we also are reserved on hearing that as well because of the sensitivity we have to remains of our neighbors and ancestors.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I'm wondering if you know this, because it's so new, but I was at a meeting last night, I guess, at the Parks and Recreation Commission, and miraculously, they agreed to respond positively, I think, to a letter from Chairman Lopez offering to work with the city to.
Yes.
Yeah, so you've heard about that.
Yes.
It's so fabulous, and I'm so hoping that we get the full riparian area in kind of some kind of restoration, status. But the real question I have for you right now is about language. When you went about trying to recover language, did you ever have access before that to native speakers of that language? And is it the Mutson language? What language is it that you have restored?
Yes.
Okay.
So unfortunately, no. We have wax cylinder recordings of a gentleman that was from an area in Sunol. Are you guys familiar with Sunol? We're in Pleasanton, that area. And it's interesting because we are made up of so many different tribelets, and so our language is shared. And so sometimes so let me give you an example. The way to say a house in Mutsun is Ruka, it's Rukka. But for a neighboring language, and I'm not saying this specific one, but an example that would be is that the way that they would spell it or say it would just be like 1K. So they'd be Ruka and we're KKA. And there's just a way that when you speak, when we have double consonants, that causes like apostle, it's Ruka. So there's a way, an emphasis on like the beginning symbol and the back end one. Or it causes us to elongate out a word. So it's all about like how you pronounce it and what you say and the way that it's spelled. So our languages can be very similar. Sometimes with the Rumsian people and with the Muwekma, they speak a Chochenyo language. Sometimes again, it's just the difference of one letter omit with it, added on or taken away, that creates the difference between us. And so that's how they were able, obviously to communicate, because there was enough familiarity between them that they could, share. And so, but getting to that knowledge and understanding those phonetics were the challenge. And there was a lot of really hard decisions we had to create our own writing system at the time, and that would have been in the early 2000s. So it hasn't been that long. And we didn't actually produce our own dictionary until 2018 and distribute it to our tribal members until 19. And so this work is, still very fresh in our communities, but the phonetics and the understanding of how to speak is the greatest challenge. And it's in no way familiar with English. And so the pronouns, we don't capitalize because capital letters symbolize sound. And so it's like you have to erase everything in your brain to be able to comprehend and absorb our language and the rules of, I guess you say, the rules of our language. And they're so different than English. And so when you're talking about adult learners versus children, it's a really long process, and it required an incredible amount of dedication and passion for it. So the fact that for me in my lifetime, I don't know that I'll be fluent. My time's shorter than theirs, but we have brought life back to words that our children now know about things like regalia and items in Mutsun before they know them in English. And for me, I'm good. Like, mission accomplished, because we've brought life back to words that there was none for hundreds and thousands of years. Our last native speaker, Sonsun, died in 1930, but there was this period of time, through her parents and such, that they couldn't speak the language at all. So well over 100 years, words we like to say that they were sleeping and now they're awakened. And so to be able to count, to know our colors, to know our greetings, these are monumental steps for our tribe and our people. And so our house is full of our words, so that our people are comfortable and can learn to speak at their own pace.
Oh, thank you. I love knowing that.
Any other questions online or
I was, but my battery died. So I'm not.
let's see.
But I will get those links from Lisa and I'll put them on the slides. And then straight away.
Let's see, as far as I can,
I think that's it.
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're current on the chat questions. So Lisa and Stephen, thanks so much. This was fascinating, and keep in touch. We put out the Highlander every 2 months, and if you have announcements or activities open to the public or anything else you want to communicate with through our newsletter, keep in touch. And thanks.
No, well, thank you. And thanks for being, as a whole community, being so welcoming and supportive of us. We truly appreciate it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we're putting the chairs away here, so thanks and keep in touch, Lisa and Stephen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You
thank
too. Thank you.